It was wild. It was absolutely wild. So my shift was from 2 in the afternoon until 11:30 at night. So we had like a 4 p.m. broadcast, a 5 p.m. broadcast, a 5:30 p.m. broadcast, and then there was the 11 o'clock news, which was like the big show. And then I left after that was done. So the schedule for me personally was a little hard. I was always missing out on a lot of like family events, and I was working Christmas, Thanksgiving, missing out on that stuff.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of these natural English conversations between two teachers. My name's Lewis, as I'm sure you know. And before I introduce our guest, or better said, allow her to introduce herself, let us know, where in the world are you right now? And what's the weather like? Because I'm in Brussels and I'm looking out of my skylight, my window on the roof, and it looks like a storm is coming. So hopefully there's no kind of lightning or thunder that interrupts this conversation. But anyway, Maria, welcome.
Hi, Lewis. Thank you so much for having me. It is great to be with you. I'm in New York City, where I live. And today we are having some dreary weather. It's very gloomy outside, very gray. And we're having a wintry mix. Do you guys use this expression in the UK?
A wintry mix. We use dreary, gloomy to say like sad and dark, but a wintry mix? No, I haven't heard of it.
I think that's a US term. We kind of use it tongue in cheek. We kind of smile, laugh a little bit when we say it. Wintry mix, kind of like this weird combination of freezing rain, a little bit of snow, maybe some sleet or hail. But yeah, so it's kind of like cold and rainy outside right here. So yeah, not today.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Yeah.
You're really selling New York City to us.
I know, right? Yeah, I can't say that this is the best time of year to be here in the city. Yeah, winter is it's a little rough.
I've heard that in the Big Apple, the concrete jungle that is New York, that the difference in temperature and seasons is really, really noticeable. That there's a huge difference between winter, summer, autumn, and spring. Is that true?
That is absolutely the case. Yeah, it is very extreme. So we definitely have the 4 seasons here. Summer is really, really sweltering. It is super hot, really humid. And when you're walking outside, I mean, the blacktop, you just bake in between the buildings. And the subway in the summer, that can also be a little rough. But yeah, and then the winters are really, really cold, frigid. It's really freezing here, snow. So, and it's a little hard because New York is a place where you always have to be outside, right? You always have to be walking around or, waiting for the bus, walking to the subway, or, waiting for your taxi, trying to hail a cab. So, yeah, the extreme weather can be a little challenging sometimes.
And you use some really nice adjectives there. So sweltering is another way of saying like roasting or boiling. Then on the other hand, you said frigid, which is another way of saying like freezing. Whoa. We'd also say Baltic in the UK if it's like absolutely freezing.
Baltic?
Baltic, like from the Baltic, because it comes like from the north, from like Scandinavia almost.
I used to live in London, and okay. I don't, it was a long time ago. It was probably 10 years ago now. So my memory is my memory's failing me. But yeah, I don't think I remember hearing that word Baltic. But
I think it's a very northern thing. There's a big north-south divide in the UK. So then if you go in one region, people will use certain words. And then in another city, they'll use completely different ones. So you never know what to expect, really.
Right.
But you've already sprinkled in some pieces of information. Could you introduce yourself in a little bit more detail?
Absolutely, of course. Well, I'll start by saying I'm all about helping people speak better English to open new doors for themselves, right? So to create better opportunities for themselves. I specialize in business English. So I help people to communicate more effectively in English in their jobs. So whether or not they want to advance their careers, maybe they want a new job, maybe they have a job interview coming up that they want to prepare for. maybe they just want to do their current jobs better and speak more confidently in the job that they're doing today. Maybe write better emails, maybe speak better English during presentations. I focus on all that, and I absolutely love it.
Like, has this always been the case? Have you always made business English your niche?
Oh, great question. So, I'm not sure if a lot of people know this, but my background, I'm not an English teacher. Maybe I am now. But I've always worked in marketing communications. So in the corporate world, so to speak. I've always worked in the technology industry and always here's a business phrase, B2B, marketing B2B. So that stands for business to business, as opposed to B2C marketing, which is business to consumer. So I've always been helping companies sell things to other businesses. That's B2B. And so I did that for way longer than I'd like to admit. For probably over 15 years, I worked in the corporate sector, and I worked in a lot of different countries. I lived and worked in Munich, Germany, in London, here in New York, in Amsterdam. Spent 5 years in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I also lived in Geneva, Switzerland. And I worked for global companies. And so I really got to see firsthand during all of that experience in all of those places, I got to see firsthand that English truly is the language that connects all of us. And global business speaks English. And I got to see that, when you can speak English and speak English well, as I said before, you will just create so many new opportunities for yourself that you may never have had otherwise. So I say all that to say that I really want to help people to expand their horizons and master English to then, achieve whatever goal that they see for themselves. So, yeah.
Interesting. So you said that you're not a teacher, but of course you are a teacher now. Did
Right.
you kind of predict this happening when you were working in the corporate world, or maybe when you were back at uni or college? Did you foresee your future being an English language teacher?
I did, actually. I did. Languages have been my biggest hobby. I would say my greatest love in life, except for my family, of course. But obviously. But I love languages. And throughout all my work experience, in marketing is so much about the written word. So we're using words and we're communicating messages all the time through marketing. So I've always loved words and language and helping people to hone their writing skills. But I've always loved when I was working at these multinational companies and working with so many non-native English speakers, I loved helping them with their English because the companies I was working at, our primary language, the official language was always English. So I kind of was teaching throughout, all my corporate experience. And it gave me so much energy. People would ask me, to review their emails, or, people would ask me for some good talking points to incorporate into their English presentations. So it was something I was kind of always doing and had envisioned to focus on it, to an even greater extent like I am today. So yeah, so happy to be doing it in this capacity.
Ah, amazing. And there was a nice verb that you used, a very businessy verb, which is to hone. You said you like helping people to hone their writing skills. What does it mean to hone?
Great question. To hone a skill or to hone something means to improve upon it, to make it even better. So if we're honing our skills in something, we're improving our skills.
Now, tell us about marketing, because everybody nowadays, I think, they know a little bit about marketing. Many teachers that work for themselves as their own bosses, they kind of have to do a lot of marketing at the same time, and they have to be able to self-promote. But marketing is one of these things that, I don't know, I'm always a bit skeptical, thinking do Coca-Cola really need to spend so much on marketing? People already know what Coca-Cola is and what they do. Do people need to spend their money on this? So yeah, tell us about your perspective of marketing and working in marketing.
Mm-hmm. So I would say yes. And the textbook definition of marketing is maybe something like, you're helping a business to promote their products or to sell a product. My personal definition of marketing is really communicating something in a way that gets somebody to do what you want them to do. That's my personal definition. And marketing as a field is very broad. We have graphic design, we have the data side, we have the communication side where you're crafting the messaging. We have content creation where you're creating content to get your message across. So marketing itself is really, really broad. But I kind of think it's even broader than that because, in my opinion, everything is marketing. When you're trying to get somebody to take an action that you want them to take, or you're trying to convince somebody to do something, whether or not you're an English teacher, offering your English courses, whether or not you work in IT, you're a software developer trying to communicate something to your team, whether or not you're in customer service trying to communicate something to your customer. You're really marketing in the sense that you're trying to effectively convey a message.
Interesting. And again, going back in the past, did you go to university or college and study marketing?
I went to university. Yeah, I went to school. It's called Xavier University in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, in the U.S. So I went to Xavier, and I studied communication arts, mass communications. I didn't mention this because my very first job was actually in news. I worked for a news channel in Cincinnati, a CBS affiliate. I was a news writer. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be a news anchor. So I got my start there. I was an intern, and then they hired me as a news writer. So I was writing, when you watch the news and the anchors are reading, the news, I was writing what they say. That's what news writers do. So I majored in communication arts, mass communications, with the hopes of doing that. And I actually had a minor in German. I've always loved the German language. I started taking German in high school. So I minored in German. And then I worked for a few years in Germany. And then I went back to that same university and I got my MBA.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
What can I say? What can I say?
And working in this CBS affiliate back there in Ohio, what were the pros and cons of this job? Because it sounds interesting. I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone who worked on like a news channel as a reporter or anything like that.
It was wild. It was absolutely wild. So my shift was from 2 p.m. until 11:30 at night. So we had like a 4 p.m. broadcast, a 5 p.m. broadcast, a 5:30 p.m. broadcast, and then there was the 11 o'clock news, which was like the big show. And then I left after that was done. So the schedule for me personally was a little hard. I was always missing out on a lot of like family events, and, I was working Christmas, Thanksgiving, missing out on that stuff. So the schedule was difficult, first of all. But a newsroom is not for people who have thin skins. I'll use an English expression. You have to have thick skin to work in a newsroom. You have to have thick skin. So you can't be very sensitive. You gotta be tough because it's hard. It's very competitive. There are a lot of people vying for these jobs. A lot of people who want these jobs, who are applying for these jobs. It pays nothing. I mean, I was getting paid like hardly anything, so it didn't pay well. And one of the hardest things for me personally was that you could have an entire news show planned out. I would have all of my stories written. We would, have the producer would have, have a show ready to go. And we would hear the police, can't remember what we called it, to be honest. We had a little machine where we listened to the police scanners.
Okay. Like the intercom or something similar to that?
Yeah, sorry, my memory is totally failing me. I don't remember what we called it, but we could listen to the police scanners, like how the policemen were communicating to each other. And, there could be like a shooting or, something crazy that would happen in town. So we would have to completely scrap the whole news show that we had worked so hard on. And then we'd have to send all of our reporters out live to, whatever incident happened and frantically cover the story, write whatever was in real time, listening to whoever was on the scene, rewriting the show. So it was it was very hectic, very chaotic. Some people really thrive in that kind of environment. They thrive in that environment. For me, I prefer something a little more stable.
I mean, it sounds very hectic, as you said, and I don't think I would thrive in that environment. And to thrive is like to succeed, to excel, to do well, to perform well at something. I think I would like buckle under the pressure, because just thinking about having to get something done with a very tight deadline, obviously you weren't kind of presenting and reporting all of the time because you said you were actually writing the stories. But if you have to kind of be the face, like I'm thinking of Anchorman, the film, the comedies, and love the films, really good. Of course, they dramatize it and make it funny, but I can kind of see how people are vying for each other's competitions and like they're vying for their positions, and it's a bit of a cutthroat business to be in. It's kind of aggressive and very competitive. So it's a good job that you got out when you did.
After a couple years doing that, I will say that was probably the most valuable work experience I ever got, because that really laid the foundation for the rest of my career, because I learned how to write. I learned how to communicate a message in a short amount of time, in a really powerful way. So it was, invaluable experience. But after a couple of years there, it was time to move on and get something that fit my personality a little better.
Great. And let's speak a little bit about you and German and learning German. Many people from the US and the UK are really interested in Spanish, in French, in Italian, because they're kind of romantic languages. They associate these languages with the beach and holidays and stuff like that. German is a little bit harder to come by people who are really into German, and got lots of German friends, but the language can sound a little bit aggressive at times. It can be a little bit scary at times, and there are lots of like memes online of what different things are called in different languages, and they'll be really, really, really similar between English, French, Spanish, Italian, and then in German, it'll be this long, long, long word, and it'll sound like
Totally. That's totally it.
German. Where did this fascination come from?
That is the $1 million question. I have just always loved it. I've always loved the country, the culture, the food. I do have some German heritage in my family tree, so maybe that was where it came from. But yeah, in my high school German class, in my senior year, my last year of high school, there were 4 of us. So there are, people were asking me that same question, why are you taking German? All I can say, I just have always loved it. Yeah. And that was the first language that I learned. So that always has a special place in my heart.
And nowadays, do you still speak it, or do you practice to try and like maintain it and prevent getting too rusty?
I wish. It is so rusty. It's completely rusty. I can still understand it because I studied abroad there just for a very short amount of time, a really quick exchange program a long time ago, right outside of Munich. And then my first job after I left news was in German, was in Munich. So I really developed, I reached fluency in the language then. And yeah, it's rusty now. So I can still understand it. I can still read it perfectly fine. But when it comes to producing the language, I struggle a little bit. Yeah, I just need, it's just a matter of time and effort, right? I just need to make time to keep it up.
Great. And Munich as a city, what's it like? I've never been. I know it's famous for Oktoberfest and Bayern Munich, the football team. But yeah, what's the city like?
Yeah, those are 2 gems of the city. It is, oh, my light just went out. Live TV here, right? Munich, to me, it's the architecture. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is beautiful. The city center, especially, in my opinion, it feels like opening a fairy tale book. I adore the architecture there. Also the food. I love the food. Bavaria, the Germans will tell you Bavaria is Munich is in the state of Bavaria. Germany has many different states. It's in the south. And the Germans will tell you Bavaria is kind of its own animal. It's very different than the rest of Germany, they will say. The food is amazing. The pretzels, they have this Oberste, kind of like in the US, we might describe it as like a cheese dip, kind of, that you use with the pretzels. Also, if you get further down into the south of Bavaria, the mountains or the Alps are just stunning. Stunning. It's a great place. I highly recommend you go visit.
I mean, I really want to go for Oktoberfest. It's one of these things that you always say with your friends, like, oh yeah, one year we should go to Oktoberfest. We should go to Munich. It'd be great, like a lad's trip away. But we keep kind of pushing it back and putting it off. At some point, we'll probably do it. But yeah, I'd love to be there having like a big stein, wearing the like lederhosen and like screaming and shouting and like, I don't know, dancing on the tables. This is how I imagine it. But maybe this is just like the touristy kind of image of it, and reality, that's not actually the case. I'm not sure.
That was totally my reality when I was there. I mean, you described it perfectly. The way that I would always describe Oktoberfest to my friends and family back home, you know, after I would come back from a night or a day there or whatever, it's just like eat, drink, and be merry. Eat, drink, and be merry. It's just a good time. So I don't think you should put that trip off any longer. You know, September is coming up soon. You have some time to plan. I'd go this year.
That's the confusing thing. So it's celebrated in September, but it's called Oktoberfest, right?
I know. I'd have to get into my history a little bit about why that is. I don't exactly remember. But yeah, it starts late September and then ends the first few days of October. So it does go into October a little bit. But yeah, it starts in September, around like the 20th-ish, depending on the year.
September Fest, you know?
Right. It doesn't...
Renaming it. It doesn't have the same ring to it.
No.
Speaking about other languages, so you speak German. It's a little bit rusty, admittedly, like many of the languages that I speak. Do you speak any other foreign languages?
Yeah, I speak Dutch because I lived and worked in Amsterdam for 5 years. And then my French is really bad, but I learned French because I lived in Geneva, Geneva in Switzerland. That's the French-speaking area of Switzerland. So my French is very not good at all. And then when I was living and working in Europe, actually in Amsterdam, I met my husband, who's from Spain. So I'm now learning Spanish, and we have a son who's almost a year and a half, and we're raising him very much in a bilingual household here in New York. So Spanish is my primary focus right now.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. And we can speak about Spanish and all of this, but first, let's talk about Dutch because, as I said, I live in Brussels, and in Brussels, it's a multilingual city. Mainly people speak French. After that, it's probably English. And after that, it's Flemish, which Flemish is basically the same as Dutch. And I remember trying on like Duolingo to learn a couple of phrases before I went to Amsterdam for my birthday last year. And I could learn a couple, but then I was like, I can't really be bothered because my impression is that anyone in the Netherlands speaks perfect English. So I'm lazy, and I thought, what's the point? I can focus my efforts on French or improving my Spanish or Portuguese or whatever. Your experience learning Dutch, how was it and how did you do it?
It was everything you just said. That is totally true. The Dutch are masters of the English language. Their English is phenomenal. Since I love languages so much, it was really important to me to learn Dutch, living there and everything. It was hard for me, though, to learn it for that reason, though, because the Dutch just speak such great English. And I don't think I met a single expat, and I knew a ton of expats there in Amsterdam, who even made an effort to learn Dutch. And all the Dutch, they were really surprised. My coworkers, because I worked for a Dutch company, they were like, why are you learning Dutch? Why would you do that? Yeah, seriously. Like exactly, Lewis, what you just said is why would I spend my time doing that? There's really no reason to. So they all thought I was nuts. And, but I really had I had a hard time trying to get them to practice with me because they wanted to, not that they needed to practice their English because it was phenomenal already, but they wanted to practice and they wanted to speak English with a native speaker. So it was hard for me to get that hands-on practice with the language at first because, they wanted to practice English, and my Dutch obviously was nowhere near their level of English. So I was kind of slowing things down. And so that took a while. That was something I needed to mount. I needed to get over that challenge.
And being a language learner and a language teacher at the same time, what is your kind of go-to strategy and approach to learning a language? Of course, it's different if you're learning Dutch, German, Spanish, because you were kind of learning it from scratch. So you had to start from the beginning. People who are watching this obviously already speak English and are trying to like kind of polish it and perfect it. But yeah, out of curiosity, how do you learn languages?
That's interesting. So, because how you approach language learning is so individual, right? People have different preferences and different things that work for them. What I like to do, instead of doing, for example, a structured course, I like to dive right in. I just kind of like to throw myself in there. I've been able to find a lot of cost-effective one-on-one, like tutoring or teaching opportunities here online. So I always like to start with one-on-one conversations. Usually I choose a native speaker in whatever language I'm learning, and I go that route. So I want to start talking as much as possible, even if I can't say much. I like to start there. Yeah.
And many people will be afraid of making mistakes, or they'll be embarrassed because they'll think like, oh, no, people are going to judge me. Like, I'm not going to be able to express myself how I want. People might even laugh at me. Like, would you give, what advice would you give our audience on this note about like not being afraid of making mistakes? Because this is a very big thing, I think, in Spain in particular, and I think around the world, where people are always a little bit, I don't know, hesitant to start actually speaking because they're kind of worried about other people judging them.
I know that's a big obstacle when it comes to language learning, isn't it? You have to just get over that fear. And you just said it. It's okay to make mistakes. And I always think about this quote, something like, every expert was once a beginner, or you have to be bad at something before you can be good at something. And obviously that applies here to language learning. It's just something that you have to be okay with it. You're never going to get better unless you start, where you are, and it's okay.
And I think the sooner you start kind of speaking, then the sooner you can realize where your mistakes lie. You can start practicing your pronunciation, because for many people who are really good at understanding with the listening and writing and reading, then when the moment comes to start speaking, they might start panicking, and then the pronunciation maybe isn't always there, and it might be difficult for other people to understand exactly what they're saying because they're just used to reading, writing, and listening. So the more people speak, the better they will speak. And I always go back to this question, which is, do people ask you, do you know English? No. They usually ask you, do you speak English? So that's why the emphasis should always be on speaking, in my opinion, at least. But let us know, people, if you're watching this, that do you feel afraid or nervous about speaking to native speakers or other people in English? And if so, let us know. Why? Why?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And speaking, I think too, if you can't find anybody to speak with, or there's so many ways to just practice by yourself. One thing I do in every language that I've learned, and I recommend the same thing to my students in English, is to read out loud. Go find a news article, find some content that you like, something that you think is fun or enjoyable, or something that you're interested in. Whatever, a blog article, somebody's social media posts, whatever it is, but just read the words to yourself out loud. And I find that really, it helps you to become more comfortable producing the language, producing the words. You learn new vocabulary too, as an added bonus, but it also just reduces the hesitation as well, and just gets you more comfortable speaking the language. So I always like to share that too.
No, 100%. And this is the tip that I always tell myself that I'm going to do, but I'm not going to lie. I'm a little bit lazy when it comes to doing it. I always
Yeah.
tell myself at the weekend, maybe when I've got a little bit more free time, like from Monday, I'm going to start reading an article out loud in French every single morning. And then life kind of happens. And I'm like, oh no, I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got to do the other thing. And then at the end of the day, you're like, do I want to read out loud? Maybe not. But that's why I think it's a good piece of advice, maybe to kind of get it over and done with first thing in the morning. Because when you do this, just like if you go to the gym first thing in the morning, then after that feeling of kind of like accomplishment is amazing. It's like, okay, I'm ticking that off. I've done my daily practice. I've done my daily workout. Now I can focus on other things. So yeah, first thing in the morning, practicing.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, I need to take that tip for sure sometimes too. It's not easy.
It's like the same with like therapists and stuff like that. They're always great at giving advice, but they might not always take on board their own advice. The same thing happens with language teachers.
It's just how it goes. Nature of the beast. Nature
Guilty. Now, moving on to Spain and Spanish. You mentioned that your husband or your partner is Spanish.
Yeah.
You're in New York at the moment. Was there ever the possibility of relocating to Spain?
There could be in the future. I love Spain. Oh my gosh, I adore that country, the language, the food. I mean, it's fantastic. So we'll see. We'll see. Madrid is probably, my husband's from Barcelona, which is a fantastic city. So I love Barcelona. Madrid, I love as well. So, we'll see. A lot of it, all this stuff usually comes down to practical stuff in life, doesn't it? Where the jobs are, raising our son, how that goes and where we think is going to be the best fit for him and our family. So we're super happy in New York now. This is one of my favorite cities in the world. I've been gone from the US for a while, so I'm really taking advantage and I'm soaking up my time being back home, so to speak. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see where life takes us.
Excellent. And what are the challenges with living in New York? Because it seems very hectic, as you mentioned earlier, things going on all of the time, perhaps stressful even. Like, what are the challenges in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I lived here almost not 8, 9 years ago by myself when I was single and stuff. And now I'm back here with a husband and a baby. So I'm living, these are like totally two different New Yorks, right? Like back when I was here by myself, it was, okay, where are the bars, where are the restaurants, where are the hot new places to go? Now it's like, oh, where's, the Tiny Tots gym class? So it's, and getting around with a child here in New York is, so these are two very different life experiences. I would say the biggest challenge for me now living here would probably be the navigating the city, the logistics, trying to manage a stroller on the subway and just that kind of stuff. But personally, I love the intensity of New York. A lot of people would probably give that as their answer. It's hectic, it's chaotic, it's intense. That gives me energy. So I actually really enjoy that piece.
Interesting. I'm just imagining the subway or the underground in the UK because I don't like any kind of public transport. I'm not
Oh,
sure
really?
why. It's always been a thing that I've always tried to avoid getting public transport if at all possible. So if I've got the option of walking 2 hours or getting the underground or a bus, I'm like, it's raining, but I mean, I can get some exercise. It'll be great.
You would rather walk 2 hours in the rain than hop on the bus.
It's a slight exaggeration, but more or less. If that was more like half an hour walking rather than getting on the bus, I'd be like, no, I'm walking for sure. I can just listen, do some exercise. But I don't know. There's just something about getting on a bus, train that I'm like, I could just walk. It'd be nicer. And then a lot of undergrounds in particular aren't always the cleanest. There can be some kind of very shady or dodgy people on the underground as well. And then my conclusion is always just, I'll walk. It's fine. Some fresh air, some exercise. Like, what is the subway like in New York? I don't know if it's as bad as the tube in London or not.
We're having some issues with the subway lately here in New York. It's been a big topic here in the news. The city is finally taking some measures to make it safer, make it feel safer for everyone, because there have been some very scary subway incidents lately. Very unfortunately, very sadly, there's been some violence, people really getting hurt or worse. So yeah, that's actually a huge thing right now going on in New York. So people just don't feel safe riding the subway. It's the tube in London I thought it was a great experience. I never had any issues on the underground in London. It was much cleaner than in New York City. And I think really in most big cities, I personally haven't heard of the kinds of issues that the New York City subway is experiencing, at least not right now. So there's some work to do here in New York to clean things up.
Okay, well, touch wood that things get better. Or I believe in the US, you'd say knock on wood, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
There's another thing that I've just remembered now when you said it, that in American English, the pronunciation is data, right? And in the UK, we say data. So you were talking about some data, or how would you pronounce it?
You know, in the US, we say both. I think this is kind of an inside joke at one of my old jobs that I had. Most people, I think, here do say data, but I, for some reason, always say data. I don't know why. I think most people here say data. Don't listen to me.
Okay. So if whatever Maria says, just don't listen.
Forget it, you know.
Also, now, let's go back in the past again. And you said that you lived in Munich, you lived in Amsterdam, and you also lived in London. So how long were you there for, and how was your experience?
How much time do you have?
Got all day.
Oh, I could talk for hours about how much I love London, the UK. I had a fantastic experience in that city. I love it so much. I was not there long enough, just a little over a year. And then my job sent me to New York. I lived in Canary Wharf, which is the financial district where all the banks are. I lived and I worked there. So I had a really nice commute. I had an 8-minute walk to my office every day. So that was nice. Yeah, it's kind of rare in London. I met so many people from all over the world. I also think London has that, it's a beautiful city, in my opinion. It's physically beautiful with the architecture and all the parks. And, but I also thought too, it also has that nice level of intensity, depending on where in the city you go. It has that nice intensity that I like too, but also I think kind of also a relaxing side. If you want to enjoy that piece as well, it's just kind of a nice mix, but I loved it. Really loved it.
And sometimes followers or subscribers will ask, like, what are the biggest differences between British English and American English? I kind of focus a lot of my content on British English ways to say things. But people like wonder sometimes, like, wait, if I study British English and then I move to the US, will people understand me? Or vice versa, if I study American English, then move to London, will people understand me? In your experience, would people understand American English in London?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially because London is so much of a global city. But I will say there were definitely instances or times where I would hear, I'd say most of the people on my team at the company that I worked for were British. My boss was, yes, most of them were British. And there were definitely some instances where they would use a word or a phrase that I wouldn't understand. One comes to mind. My boss was from Liverpool, and maybe my first days at work or one of my first interactions with me, he said, "Are you all right?" And to my American ear, that means something's wrong. Are you all right? That means, well, yeah, I'm Steve. I'm fine. Of course I'm all right. What do I look like? But so you can tell me, Lewis, what does that mean in the UK?
It's funny because literally on Saturday, I posted a reel and a short teaching what all right means in English. So
Okay.
check it out after this. But basically, if I say, all right, it's like, hi, hey, hello.
Okay.
You could also like, you're right, which
Uh-huh.
is like, how are you?
Uh-huh.
And then if you change the intonation slightly and you're like, are you all right? Then it's more like, okay, the American meaning where you're worried about someone and you want to know if they are okay.
Okay. Okay.
But also, it could mean like, are you crazy? Like, are you all right? And then it could mean other things as well. It's like, all right, like, calm down. So
Okay.
I think this is one of the buzzwords or like trending words in British English that we use it for many, many different scenarios. In particular, just to say like, hi, hello. It's like, all right. Like if you're walking around in a city, maybe not in a city because people are less friendly, but if you're in the countryside and you walk past someone, usually what I'll do is I'll kind of nod my head and at the same time, I'll say, all right, all right,
Oh,
all
really?
right,
I think I'd
all right.
seen or heard that. That's new for me. Okay, I'm learning. I learned something new just now because that would cause confusion in the U.S.
It's like, yes, I'm okay.
Yeah. If you just pass someone randomly on the street and say, all right, you definitely get some raised eyebrows. That would cause some confusion for sure. Yeah.
In the UK, it's so common. It's usually followed also by mate. Like, all right,
Okay.
mate. You're all right, mate. Yeah, you're all right. All right. Yeah, a very,
I
very versatile word.
apparently, yeah, you guys use it in a lot of different ways. One other incident comes to mind again with my boss Steve, great guy. He was telling me something about his like the thing he did the night before, his weekend plans or something, but he said that they went out for tea. And I turned to my coworker Claire, who was from Dundee, Scotland, and she had to because I must have looked confused. Like you went out for tea at like 8 o'clock at night or whatever. Like okay, I
Think
didn't.
about the caffeine.
Yeah, I was like I didn't realize that was a thing. But then she had to clarify for me that means they went out to dinner. And I thought, okay, well, that makes a little more sense. So just stuff like that. There are some things that require a little explanation.
No, for sure. This is another thing that basically in the south of England, usually, generally speaking, people have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this is the common RP British English. Breakfast in the morning, lunch at noon, something like that, and then dinner in the evening. However, in certain areas of the United Kingdom, mainly in the north or kind of outside of the London area, so a lot of people will say breakfast, dinner, and tea. So where
Uh-huh.
I was raised, we'd always have dinner at like 1 o'clock and then have tea at 6, 7, something like that. And that's the same in most of the north and most of like Scotland and places that are more, let's say, countryside-y. However, if you are around London, Oxford, Cambridge, Brighton, the stereotypical, like quintessential British places, they do the breakfast, lunch, dinner, but not everywhere.
Interesting. So it really is regional to your point at the beginning of our conversation. There are lots of regional differences within the UK.
Exactly, for sure. And if anyone has visited the United Kingdom and had any cultural shocks, let us know in the comments. And let's kind of finish off and wrap it up with your transition from marketing and the corporate world to English to Excel.
Mhm.
What was going through your mind when you kind of made this decision and decided to set up your own company? Why?
Mhm. Oh, that's a great question. And actually, life kind of forced me to do it. So my husband and I were living in Geneva, Switzerland at the time. I was a marketing director for a tech company based in Amsterdam, living in Geneva. And my husband got a new job opportunity in the Bahamas. And so that would have meant, international move, 6 hour time difference. I thought, I can't continue my current job doing that. I also didn't have a work permit to work in the Bahamas. I wasn't authorized to work. I couldn't legally work there for another company. So I was forced to resign from my job as marketing director. So we got to the Bahamas and where we lived. We ended up living there for about 3 years. And I thought, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity to do what I've always wanted to do. So let's go. Let's do it. And then English to Excel was born. So that's kind of how it happened. I was kind of forced to start doing what I'd always wanted to do. So it was a great thing.
Perfect. Amazing. Long may it continue. And Bahamas as well. I thought you had just lived in like Europe, but no, as I said, you're a box of surprises, a box of chocolates.
Can I say?
The Bahamas, what's it like? It seems like a paradise.
It is paradise. It is absolutely beautiful. Yeah, we lived there for 3 years. We actually just moved to New York from there just a few months ago. So we've just left. It is absolutely stunningly beautiful. The water is a color that is it's absolutely gorgeous.
I can sense a but.
No, there's no but. It's just, you know what? It is, if you love the beach and you love the water and you love the sunshine, it's the perfect place for you. It's amazing. The people are amazing. English is it's an English speaking country. Mm-hmm. They speak with a beautiful Bahamian accent, which I love. If you're a city person, living on an island probably isn't, going to be your ideal place. So it's just, always a matter of personal preference. I will say the summers are really difficult. The summers, there is a humidity down there that is unlike anything I have ever experienced. It is hot and humid I'd say like a good 5 months out of the year. So that can be a little challenging, but gorgeous place.
Okay. I mean, if the only but is the humidity, then it must have been pretty good.
Yeah. It's an amazing place. I'm excited to go back to visit. We still have a lot of friends down there and stuff, great people. So we'll be down there not too long after all this humid period subsides.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Well, on that note, let's call it a day and let's finish off this conversation. It's been really interesting to get to know much more about you, your life, languages, teaching, all of these different things whilst teaching many advanced phrasal verbs, business English, idioms. So again, if anybody is unsure about any of the advanced words and phrases that we've used during this conversation, let me know and we'd be happy to clear up any doubts. But yeah, thank you, Maria, so much.
Thanks for having me, Lewis. Been really enjoyed myself. Great conversation.
My pleasure. The pleasure was all mine. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Right. Bye-bye.